Hello everyone and welcome back to Questions in Catholicism with Sawyer Studios. And I was cruising Facebook the other day, probably for a little bit too long. I came across this video of essentially a sheep that had been lost in the woods for at least, I think they said 3 years. They don't know how it survived, but they brought it back to this Australian care center, this farm that took it in, pretty much nurtured it back to health. Let's just watch some of the video and yeah, let's do that.
He's forgotten somehow, lost in the forest at least 5 years. I think he was a bit shell-shocked when he arrived. He couldn't really see because the wool had grown over his eyes. It must have been so incredibly painful. The local chap saw this mammoth moving amongst the trees and had to look twice. And it turned out to be the sheep, so he contacted us to see if we could take the sheep on, which we readily said yes. I can't imagine how he survived, but he did.
That's good. That's all right. Good girl. Wow, I don't know.
Another sheep was with him, letting him know everything's okay.
This is a good place to be, old mate.
He had over 35 kilos worth of wool on him. That sounds how long. The poor fellow had been out there. It actually took nearly an hour to get up because we had to go into hand scissors and it was matted and he had bits of sticks and twigs, all sorts of things in his wool. When we got the fleece off him, we finally relieved him of his burden. As he walked down an alleyway, he started to get stronger in his legs. And he had Chloe and Molly there on the other side so they could see each other through the stores.
Yeah. That's the best sign.
He's got a pretty good life now. He's certainly got more confidence. Barack has evolved every single day into the wonderful being that he is. We are just so grateful that Barack came into our world.
I couldn't help while watching it but think about the obvious parable of the lost sheep. If we open up to Luke chapter 15 from the very beginning, for the first 7 verses it says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him," being Jesus, "and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them.' So Jesus told them this parable. Which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who need no repentance." Looking at this sheep that was lost, seeing all of its wool, make it 5 times heavier than it needs to be, it needed to be carried on this cart. The person couldn't actually pick up the sheep and bring it back to the farm. I just think about when we are far and distant away from God. Jesus says that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. And sometimes we feel the freedom. Oh, it's not really freedom. We know that freedom is not the ability to do what we want, but to do what we ought. That's where true freedom is. And sometimes when we indulge in sin, in mortal sin, for a while, in rebellion against Christ, it might feel freeing at first. Sort of like the story of the prodigal son, and how the prodigal son in the same chapter, Luke chapter 15, he's going off, he's just using he's just squandering his father's wealth on prostitutes, gambling, etc. And eventually he just hits rock bottom because something inside of all that whatever it meaningless all that meaninglessness in sexual pleasure or gluttonous, like indulging oneself in all of these foods, drinks, in the excitement of gambling or whatever the high we get. It doesn't have to be that. It could be anything in our life. It eventually starts to weigh on us, and it doesn't give us that same feeling again. So we keep going back to it, and it never fully fulfills us. I can just imagine the longer we are away from God, if we've known God, if we've been in the house, if you are baptized into the church, a baptized Catholic, then you have been in that relationship. But if you've left, imagine how much wool has grown on us, how much wool has weighed us down without us really realizing it. Because that's another thing. Like, you don't recognize it. It's not like one day, the sheep was just running around freely, and then the next day it couldn't move. That would be jarring. But to us, it's also a process. Like, one day the sheep is running around, maybe a couple weeks go by, its wool goes out. It's like, like my hair grows like insane, everyone. Like, I need a haircut soon. But sometimes you don't really realize it till it's like, like, oh wow, I like my hair is like more easily getting in my face here. So I just make these small adjustments, like I'm just gonna comb it this way and just do this every once in a while. And then eventually it's just gonna get like down here to my neck, and then like, okay, I'm just gonna like do this once in a while. It's like a minor inconvenience, but like it's still okay. The sheep probably could run super fast, and then maybe after a year couldn't run as much because the wool was weighted down, but it could still walk, it could still move. Maybe it took a little bit longer for the sheep to get from point A to point B, but it's not really a big deal because you can still get from point A to point B. It's not as fast. 2 years go by, maybe the sheep is just waddling, it's no longer walking, but you have to like waddle, but you can still get there. If we just saw how much sin affects us negatively, like if it wasn't just a process, if our hearts didn't just slowly, if our hearts didn't, sort of like that boiling frog, and I know that's a misconception. I'm pretty sure that scientifically that's not right, but the concept, everyone knows the sort of like the misconception, the myth that if you put a frog in cold water, slowly boil the water will boil and the frog's temperature will raise with it, and the frog won't realize that the water's that it's actually killing itself because it's happening gradually, not all at once. And that's what sin does. That's what Satan tries to do. He tries to get us into this environment where we slowly make compromises. We slowly stop doing these habitual practices that we used to do when we first learned to love Christ. I think most of us have forgotten what it's like to be a free sheep, what it's like to run around in a pasture. Yes, there's fences, but we can either be out there in the world without a shepherd and just let our wool grow and grow and grow until it weighs us completely down, that we are just either stuck where we are, or to a point where we're just so stubborn that we'd rather just sit around and sort of like accept this lifestyle of slothfulness rather than being in the embraces of a shepherd, of a farmer, or whatever, these carekeepers who love the sheep. Yes, there's a fence. Yes, there's a fence around the property. There are restrictions, there's rules. We don't get to eat whatever we want. We eat what the shepherd feeds us. And maybe we have a curfew. And we're in a family, and some of the other sheep in that farm, we might not get along with. We have to live with them. But here's the thing, the farmer, the shepherd, they're gonna shave you, and they're gonna maintain that wool so that you are not constricted, so that you can be the most free that we can be. Think about this. Without the fence, most people would say that's the most freedom you could have. But think about it, we need the fence, because without the fence, we'd actually end up in a place where we wouldn't be able to move or do anything. That's not freedom. The idea that God gives us, that yes, there's this fence, there's these restrictions, of course, there's covenant. But that is the only way for us to maintain the most freedom, the most ability, the most rational autonomy that we can have to exercise ourselves as Catholics, as Christians. Because we need that shepherd to shave the wool off when the wool is getting too heavy. We need that easy yoke because we can't carry it by ourselves. So just like that sheep who comes home and has that enormous weight just lifted off of them. And you can see at the end of the video, there were still these scars, but it was eating, it was drinking, it was running around, it was buying, or whatever a sheep, whatever that word is, it was happy. It didn't care about the fences because it knew that someone loved it. And Satan will try to give us lies that the Father doesn't love us. That was the first lie in the Bible, that, oh, God doesn't love you, God just wants to keep this from you. Satan tries to tell us that the things outside of the Father's restriction, that's where our happiness will be. You can be like God if you just leave the confines of the fence. But that's a lie. So let's trust in the Lord today, everyone. Stay with your Creator. Stay with your shepherd. And although the fence may feel constricting, it's the fence that God provides for us that protects us the most, that keeps us happy the most, and provides us with the most freedom. Thanks for watching, everyone. This is Story Studios. Like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more of these, and God bless.